They mocked the app delivery man until they discovered what he was carrying in silence. He was just another delivery man. Worn backpack, headphones in, head down. No one gave him a second glance. No one. Until that night, when he stopped at the wrong door, and everything began to change. First came the laughter, then the silence, and finally, the fear. If this story has already given you chills, subscribe. What's coming next will make you look differently at every delivery at your door. He always showed up at the hour when the streets began to empty, when the lampposts buzzed quietly to life and the last light of the sun still lingered in the windows. His uniform was faded, his delivery bag frayed at the edges, his steps almost soundless. At first glance, there was absolutely nothing remarkable about him. Not tall, not short, not young or old, just one more delivery guy among thousands, a shadow in the city's daily rhythm, blending into the background like cracked pavement. People passed him without looking twice. Children didn't wave. The concierge barely acknowledged his presence, always keeping a subtle distance, as if the man's silence carried a threat. But he never complained, never asked for anything. He would just deliver the package, nod slightly, and vanish into the evening like a ghost returning to its hiding place. No one knew his full name. In the app, it simply said, Lucas P. Some thought it was fake. Others assumed he was from a shelter, or maybe just another loner lost in the urban sprawl. But the truth was, no one cared enough to ask. Not until that night. That night he arrived at one of the tallest buildings in the neighborhood, a place where everyone knew each other's business, where the elevator walls whispered secrets, and where fake smiles were part of the dress code. He had a simple delivery, a brown paper bag, unmarked, lightweight, just another stop, just another doorbell. But something was different. The security camera caught everything. Lucas stood quietly in the corner of the lobby waiting. A group of residents, 3 young men in expensive sneakers and too loud laughter, began to notice him. One of them pulled out his phone and started mimicking Lucas. He exaggerated the slow steps, the hunched posture, even the way he held the delivery bag like it weighed more than it should. The others burst into laughter. Then the boldest of them walked over and said, "Hey, you lose your tongue? Or just carrying rotten pizza in that bag of yours?" Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't look angry. He simply lifted his gaze and met the boy's eyes, calmly, almost anciently, as if those eyes had seen much more than this moment. The laughter stopped, only for a second, a single, frozen second that felt longer than it should have. Something shifted in the room. The boy stepped back, suddenly unsure. His smirk faltered. The others chuckled again, but it lacked the same bite. The porter looked away. The energy in the room had changed. It was subtle, like the air before a storm, like the second before a scream. Lucas handed the bag over. The concierge hesitated before taking it. Lucas then turned, walked toward the door, and disappeared. But not down the street, not to the curb. In the camera footage, he simply vanished, halfway through the lobby exit, as if the shadows outside swallowed him whole. The video spread quickly in the building's group chat. First came the laughter, then the questions. Who was he really? Why didn't he speak? And what the hell was in that bag? People stopped laughing after that. Something about his stare lingered in the minds of those who saw the footage. It wasn't just that he didn't respond. It was how silence could feel louder than any insult. How one glance, calm and heavy, could haunt even the boldest of mockers. That night, they laughed. But it was the last time anyone did, because that was the moment they realized this delivery man might not just be delivering food. He could be delivering something no one had the courage to open. This was the kind of neighborhood where laughter echoed through the halls. Not always from joy, but from habit. It was the default language of people who didn't know how to sit in silence. The concierge laughed when people were late with rent. The moms on the balconies laughed at their children's scraped knees. Even the shopkeeper laughed when someone knocked over a display of glass bottles. No one ever took anything too seriously. At least, not out loud. In this place, being serious was weakness. Feeling too deeply was embarrassing. And noticing someone who didn't fit in? That was entertainment. They'd created a system without even realizing it. A hierarchy of masks. The louder you laughed, the higher you stood. The quieter you were, the easier it was to become the next joke. They were addicted to it. The performance, the pointing fingers, the sense of belonging through exclusion. And Lucas, the delivery man, had become the latest character in their unspoken play. After the elevator incident, word about him spread fast. He didn't just carry food. People began to say he carried energy. Something strange. He stared at me once and I felt cold, one woman said in the laundry room. He looked at me like he knew my secrets, said another, barely above a whisper. Still the laughter came. Nervous now, but persistent. Because laughing was how they survived things they didn't understand. They laughed when someone claimed the light in the hallway flickered only when Lucas was nearby. They laughed when a tenant said their dog refused to go near the front door after one of his deliveries. They even laughed when the kid from 6B drew a picture of Lucas with no face, saying, "He looks like this in my dreams." But in private, behind the curtains and locked doors, the laughter started to crack. The man from 9D, who once called Lucas a ghost, now left tips at the door and never looked him in the eye. The influencer girl from the 7th floor stopped filming in the lobby altogether. One evening, she posted a video captioned, "Some silence isn't peaceful. It watches you." Something in the air was shifting, a heaviness like a blanket soaked in cold rain. People began avoiding the lobby at night. The doorman requested a shift change so he wouldn't have to work past 8 p.m. And yet, no one ever spoke about what they were really feeling. Because to speak it aloud would be to admit it was real. Laughter had been their shield, a collective delusion, a way to feel in control of things far bigger than themselves. But Lucas didn't laugh. He never had. And the more they saw him, the more they realized. It was his silence that held the power. Not because it was passive but because it was ancient, intentional, like he knew something they didn't, like he saw something coming. What kind of man absorbs mockery without a blink? What kind of man disappears from camera frames? Who carries a bag that never opens yet always seems heavier the later it gets? And what if, just what if, the reason he never spoke was because he wasn't meant to speak in this world? They used to laugh at everything, but lately that laughter came slower, drier, like a sound trying to escape from a throat that already knows it's too late. Because in the heart of that neighborhood, filled with fake smiles, cold stairwells, and locked doors, something was waking up, something carried in silence, something that didn't laugh back. It was a Wednesday, nothing special, just one of those middle-of-the-week days that blends into the background. Cloudy skies, honking horns, tired commuters. And yet, at exactly 5:42 p.m., something happened that no one could explain, not even the traffic cameras. Lucas was seen crossing Avenida Baltazar, one of the busiest streets in the district. Dozens of cars, constant noise. But he didn't rush. He didn't wait for the light. He just walked, slow, deliberate, like time didn't apply to him. And as he did, one by one, the cars stopped. Not slammed on brakes, not honking in frustration, just stopped. People would later say they weren't sure why they paused. Some claimed their steering locked. Others said they couldn't move, like their bodies had decided, against all logic, to freeze. Like their eyes couldn't look away from the man in the faded delivery jacket walking across the street without looking up, without hesitation. He didn't even glance at the drivers. He held the bag against his chest that day, not on his back. It looked different, heavier, wrapped in something black. The air around him seemed denser. Some pedestrians described it as heat, others as a kind of pressure in their ears, like when you go up too fast in an elevator. A woman on a scooter said she felt a sharp pain in her jaw the moment he passed. Her mirror cracked without being touched. Another man claimed his phone screen glitched and turned completely black while trying to record. When it came back, the footage was corrupted, static, like something had short-circuited more than just technology. The traffic didn't move for 5 minutes, and Lucas was long gone by then. He had entered a small alleyway beside the bakery, one that had no exit, no back door, no visible connection to another street. When a few curious kids ran after him, they found the alley completely empty, just the smell of dust, and a faint sound, almost like a ticking clock. The incident made it into the local news. Mass traffic freeze at Baltazar Avenue, unknown cause. Experts were interviewed. Theories about electromagnetic interference were proposed. A few even blamed a potential gas leak or collective hallucination. But the footage didn't lie. 26 cars, 41 people on foot, and not a single movement as Lucas passed by. Not fear, not panic, just stillness. In the following days, stories started to spread. Low murmurs in stairwells, anonymous posts on forums. People began to connect the event to the quiet delivery man. Some dismissed it, others started watching more closely, tracking his routes, checking timestamps on security cameras, trying to spot a pattern. But what made the moment unforgettable wasn't just the way the city froze, it was how normal he looked doing it, how mundane the movement was. A man in scuffed sneakers, crossing a road, holding a bag to his chest like it contained nothing more than a warm meal. And yet, that bag seemed to pull reality inward, like gravity reversed, like it demanded reverence. There's a certain terror in realizing something extraordinary just happened. Inside the most ordinary hour of your day, that realization crept into everyone who witnessed it. They began to question things they never noticed before. The flickering lights, the cold draft in certain hallways, the dreams they'd been having with no clear beginning. Lucas didn't stop traffic by force. He didn't scream, didn't wave. He didn't even look at them. And somehow, that made it worse. His name was Raphael, but everyone in the building just called him Rafa. 17, cocky, loud, the kind of teenager who had never tasted real consequence. He walked through the halls like he owned the building, always surrounded by laughter, always pushing the limit just enough to avoid punishment. But Rafa wasn't cruel, not intentionally. He was just empty in all the places that demanded silence and empathy. And so when Lucas entered his orbit, Rafa did what he did best, turned discomfort into spectacle. It started small. Every time Lucas passed through the lobby, Rafa would mutter something under his breath, loud enough for the others to hear. "Here comes the silent reaper," he'd say, laughing with that fake bravado that teenagers wear like armor. The others would snicker, not because it was funny, but because in Rafa's world, laughing was safer than questioning. Then came the night Rafa followed him. It was a dare, half serious, whispered among his friends over cheap energy drinks and wireless speakers. "Dude, just follow him. See where he goes when he vanishes. Maybe he's a drug mule. Maybe he's a vampire. Maybe he sleeps standing up inside a locker or some shit." Laughter, more bravado. Phones raised, recording already, as if mocking someone required proof. And so Rafa waited, hoodie on, phone tucked in hand, camera rolling. When Lucas left the building with a delivery bag strapped tightly to his chest, Rafa kept his distance, walking half a block behind. Lucas didn't turn, didn't speed up. He walked like someone moving through a dream, calm, deliberate, unnervingly slow. Rafa followed him through backstreets he'd never seen before, alleys that didn't appear on GPS. At some point, the city's noise faded. No cars, no wind, just the sound of his own breathing, and Lucas's quiet footsteps. After 15 minutes, Lucas turned a corner and disappeared behind a rusted metal gate. It was barely open. Rafa, grinning, pushed it gently, expecting a warehouse or storage unit. But what he found was silence. Not the silence of an empty place, but a silence that watched. There were mirrors nailed to the walls, dozens of them, all cracked in different ways, and in the center, a single chair, facing the only intact mirror in the room. On it, someone had written in smudged wet ink, "He carries what others bury." The phone in Rafa's hand glitched. The screen went black. The air grew thick, like every breath took effort. He turned to leave, but Lucas was standing at the door. No anger, no threat, just stillness. And Rafa laughed, a dry, nervous laugh. The laugh of someone who doesn't know how to run, doesn't know how to scream, doesn't know how to believe what he's seeing. "What is this, man? Some kind of haunted Airbnb?" Lucas tilted his head and said nothing. The boy backed away, stumbled into the alley, ran all the way home. He deleted the video that night, deleted the app, deleted every mention of Lucas from his phone. The next day he told his friends he was done, said he had better things to do. They joked, called him soft. He didn't answer. He just started looking out windows more often, locking doors before sunset, whispering to himself at night when no one else could hear. Rafa never laughed at Lucas again, because sometimes the only thing worse than not knowing what someone carries is almost knowing, and realizing you were never supposed to look that deep. Her name was Clara, 22, quiet, kept to herself, the kind of girl whose presence lingered in the smell of chamomile tea and half-read books stacked on a windowsill. She lived alone in Unit 4B, the corner apartment with the soft yellow light that stayed on long after everyone else went to bed. She had no loud arguments, no visitors, no stories that made their way into the building's rumor chain. If Clara had a past, she wore it like a second skin, soft, seamless, untouchable, until the night she opened her door to Lucas. It was a Tuesday, windy. The hallway lights flickered as if the building was catching its breath. She'd ordered something small, not food, but a sealed envelope, a special courier request through the app. No tracking number, no signature required, just a brief note, delivered to recipient only, after sunset. Lucas arrived at 8:46 p.m. The security camera caught the moment. A muted knock, Clara opening the door with a curious half-smile, a short exchange of glances. No words, no tension, just something heavy in the air, like the gravity between two planets about to collide. She took the envelope with both hands. Lucas turned and walked away. The door closed. That was the last time anyone saw Clara. The next morning, the lights in 4B were still on. By evening, neighbors began to whisper. She hadn't walked her usual loop through the courtyard. She hadn't stopped by the lobby to check her mail. By day 3, someone knocked. No answer. No sounds. No movement behind the peephole. The building manager unlocked the door. What they found was nothing. No chaos. No sign of struggle. The apartment was untouched. A cup of tea on the table. A book left open on page 47. A phone charging on the nightstand. Still at 94%. But no Clara. The strange part wasn't just that she was gone. It was what she left behind. On the living room wall above the couch, something had been written in charcoal. I opened it, and it opened me. No one knew what it meant. The envelope was never found. The security system had no footage of Clara leaving. No signs of exit. Not even footprints on the hallway carpet. The police came, took notes, filed a report, but there was no urgency, no headline, just another quiet disappearance in a city that doesn't flinch anymore. But the neighbors flinched, especially when someone asked, who delivered the envelope? They all knew the answer. Lucas. He never returned to that building after Clara vanished. But residents said they'd still see him, across the street at the corner near the florist, standing completely still with the bag on his chest, watching the windows, not moving, not blinking, like he was waiting for something, or someone. The fear wasn't loud. It crept in like humidity, slowly, invisibly, until everything felt damp and unwelcome. Tenants stopped ordering deliveries after sunset. Doors were opened a little slower, and some swore on sleepless nights that they heard something moving inside apartment 4B, long after it had been sealed shut. A whisper, a scratch on the wall, a breath that didn't belong to anyone, but they never spoke it aloud, because the moment they acknowledged it, they'd have to admit what was really terrifying, that sometimes the thing you invite in through your door doesn't just enter your home, it enters you. There are things cameras are designed to capture, motion, light, faces, timelines, but there are moments, rare and unsettling, when the machinery fails, not because of a glitch or a broken wire, but because something steps into frame that wasn't meant to be seen. The building's main security camera had never failed, installed just a few months prior, top of the line, cloud synced, motion activated with infrared night vision. It had caught everything from delivery men sneezing to cats sneaking through lobby windows. It had never missed a moment, until 3:17 a.m. on a cold Thursday. It began with a motion alert. The security system sent a push notification to Mr. Nestor, the night manager. He was on the 4th floor, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching late-night TV reruns. When he opened the feed on his phone, the screen was frozen, a still image of the lobby. Lucas was standing in the center, alone. At first, Nestor assumed the stream was buffering, but it wasn't. The timestamp had stopped too. No seconds ticking by, no audio, no movement. Lucas was just standing there, one foot slightly turned inward, as if caught mid-step. His eyes, or at least what looked like his eyes, were locked on the camera lens. That's when Nestor tried to rewind the feed. Nothing. Tried switching to the backup angle. Also frozen. Tried restarting the app. No change. Downstairs, the lobby was dead quiet. The fluorescent lights flickered in real time. But the camera still showed that same frame. Lucas, motionless, in a room that now looked entirely unfamiliar under surveillance. In the recorded image, the lighting appeared dimmer, more orange, as if the whole place had shifted 1 degree closer to something, not quite alive. He decided to go downstairs. By the time Nestor reached the lobby, Lucas was gone. There was no sound, no door swinging, no echo of steps, just stillness. But something else had changed. On the tiled floor beneath the camera, faint scuff marks formed a spiral, circular, deliberate, like someone had been slowly pivoting in place. Again and again. The camera resumed 37 minutes later. It blinked back to life mid-frame, but the angle had shifted slightly, as if someone had touched it ever so gently and left it askew. Lucas was no longer visible, but the reflection in the elevator door, just a glint, showed a tall shadow walking away, impossible to place in terms of shape or motion. It didn't move like a person. The building's tech support reviewed the data later that week. No explanation. No corrupted files. No server errors. The official report said, unexplained feed interruption. No human tampering detected. But Nestor never forgot what he saw in that still frame. It wasn't just Lucas's eyes staring into the camera. It was the feeling, that sharp, gut-pulling sensation that something behind the glass was aware, not just of being watched, but of who was watching. He requested to be moved to the morning shift 2 days later, said the nights had gotten too quiet, that the silence made it hard to think, that sometimes when he closed his eyes, he still saw Lucas in that frozen image. Only now, Lucas was blinking, and every night since the camera blinks too, at exactly 3:17 a.m., even when no one is there, even when the lights are off, even when the feed is disconnected, because some moments don't fade, they wait, and some eyes don't just look at the lens, they look through it. The app glitched, or at least that's what they thought. It was 11:09 p.m. when the concierge, Rodrigo, received a notification on the building's delivery terminal. Order confirmed, ETA, 3 minutes, delivered to Unit 7A. Nothing unusual at first glance, but Rodrigo frowned. He had seen this order already. Same unit, same instructions, same timestamp. In fact, just an hour earlier, Lucas had delivered something there. A small, neatly sealed white box with no return address. Rodrigo remembered clearly because the woman from 7A, Sofia, had refused to open the door. She only cracked it an inch, reached through the gap, took the box with a trembling hand and whispered thank you, like she'd just accepted a secret. Her eyes were red. She didn't look like she'd been crying, more like she hadn't blinked in hours. Now the order was showing up again. Same sender, same route. But here's the thing. When Rodrigo checked the logs on his screen, only the second delivery was listed. The first one, the one he knew had already happened, was gone, erased. No trace of the original request, no timestamp, no digital footprint. At 11:12 p.m., Lucas arrived. Rodrigo tried to explain the error. I think this order already came through earlier. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe someone duplicated it. Lucas didn't speak. He just raised the box. Identical. Rodrigo hesitated. You want me to call her? Maybe we shouldn't. But Lucas had already walked past him, heading for the elevator. The ride to the 7th floor felt longer than usual, as if the seconds had been stretched like chewing gum. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty. Lights dimmer than they should have been. The kind of dimness that doesn't come from power failure, but from presence. Rodrigo waited by the elevator, hands sweating. Lucas knocked. Once, then twice. Slower. No answer. He placed the box on the floor gently, stood for a moment, then turned to leave. And then the door opened. Sofia stood there barefoot, eyes wide, face pale as porcelain. But her hands were different. They were wet, not with water, not with tears, something darker. Her lips moved, forming no sound. Just one word, repeated again and again, without voice. Why again? Lucas didn't answer. He didn't even stop. He walked past Rodrigo, straight into the elevator, and disappeared between the closing doors. Rodrigo looked back at Sofia. She didn't pick up the second box. She just stared at it, backing away slowly as if it might explode or whisper. The next morning, both boxes were gone. No one saw her leave the apartment. No footage recorded her exit. But that wasn't the strangest part. When tech support came to reset the building's delivery system, suspecting a data breach, they discovered something buried in the back-end logs. An archived message, auto-sent from the delivery server, dated exactly 1 year earlier, to the same address, same user ID. The message read, "Recurring order fulfilled. 365-day loop complete." The timestamp? 11:09 p.m., same as the glitch, same as the night before. And when they asked Sophia, when they knocked on her door to verify her identity, to ask if she'd placed the order again, and no one answered. The apartment was empty, clean, devoid of any personal belongings. Just 2 items remained: a sealed white box, and a note taped to the door from the inside, barely legible in smudged ink. "Some deliveries return wheat when you don't let them go." Rodrigo quit the following week, and the building stopped accepting deliveries after dark. But sometimes around 11:09 p.m., the terminal still pings, just once, then goes silent again. Because some loops don't break, they wait to be repeated. She'd lived in the building longer than anyone, longer than the cameras, longer than the concierge staff, longer even than most of the paint on the walls. Her name was Dona Marlene. 8th floor, window facing the street. She spent most of her days in that chair by the window, wrapped in her lavender shawl, tea at her side, and a pair of opera binoculars resting in her lap like an old companion. The neighbors joked that she was the building's surveillance system, that she knew everything, who cheated, who lied, who came home late with strangers. Her eyes missed nothing, and yet they were tired eyes, carved deep with time and sorrow, the kind of gaze that doesn't judge, just records, and she saw him long before anyone else did. Lucas, the quiet one, the one no one else noticed, or wanted to notice. "I saw him the first time before anyone else even ordered from that app," she once said. "He stood at the lamppost across the street, just standing. No phone, no bag, just waiting." No one believed her, of course. They assumed she was confused, as old people tend to be. But Marlene insisted. She'd seen Lucas months before he was hired by any delivery service, before he carried that bag, before he had a name. "He came before the deliveries," she whispered one day to the housekeeper. "He was already here. The others just hadn't looked up yet." And then came the night she screamed. A piercing cry from the 8th floor window, loud enough to wake the whole block. People rushed to her door, panicked. The doorman called the paramedics. When they entered the apartment, they found her on the floor, shaking, pointing toward the window with a trembling hand. "He looked at me," she gasped. "He looked right at me, from the middle of the street, and it wasn't his face anymore." "What did you see?" they asked. But she wouldn't speak again that night, or the next, or the one after that. They thought it was a mental break, age, isolation, trauma, the usual explanations. But something was different. Dona Marlene no longer sat by the window. She no longer drank her tea. She taped the curtain shut from the inside, layer after layer, like she was sealing something out, or something in. And then, she started painting. The walls of her apartment filled with brush strokes. Not beautiful, not chaotic, but repetitive. The same figure over and over again, a man in a hooded jacket, a bag clutched to his chest, and eyes completely black. Not blank, black. One painting had words scratched beneath it. "He doesn't knock. He already knows who's waiting." When her niece came to visit a week later, she found the apartment locked from the inside, the windows sealed, the curtains burned. Dona Marlene was gone. But the rocking chair by the window? It was still moving, as if someone had just stood up and left moments before. The walls still carried the scent of oil paint and old tea. The room felt heavy, dense, but quiet. On the windowsill, behind the last unburned curtain, was a single page torn from a journal. One sentence written in shaky pen. "I warned them. He's not delivering food. He's delivering memory." That was the last anyone saw of her. Some say she disappeared. Others say she escaped. And a few, only those who've seen him up close, would believe something else entirely. That she was the first to truly understand. Lucas didn't come to deliver. He came to collect. There was one thing he always carried, not the delivery bag. That came and went, sometimes on his back, sometimes pressed to his chest like a newborn child. But the other object, that never left his hands, ever. It was small, rectangular, wrapped tightly in black cloth, the fabric frayed at the edges like it had weathered decades, maybe longer. Some said it was a book, Others thought it was a box. A few believed it might be an urn, but no one had ever seen it open. No one had ever seen it move. It never made a sound, but it was always there, clutched in his left hand, even when he rang the doorbell, even when he walked through the rain without an umbrella, even when he helped an old man up the stairs. Yes, someone once swore that happened. Lucas held the object in one hand and lifted the man with the other, never once shifting his grip. That's when rumors started. Some harmless, some disturbing. One tenant claimed they saw it glow faintly in the dark. Another swore she heard whispers when Lucas passed too close. Not from him, but from it. A low, layered whisper, like a conversation between people who were already dead. The air around it always felt colder, more still, as if the object wasn't just an item and but a presence. No one dared to ask him about it, except once. A boy from the 3rd floor, maybe 7 years old, approached Lucas in the lobby. Children, after all, haven't yet learned the fear that adults wear like armor. "What's that in your hand?" he asked, pointing. Lucas looked down at him, slowly, patiently, and then said something he had never said to anyone else in the building. "It remembers." That's all. 2 words. But the weight of them echoed in the hallway long after Lucas had stepped into the elevator. The boy never spoke again, at least not about that moment. His mother said he began drawing strange shapes, spirals, circles with tiny figures around them, and always, the small black rectangle, hovering at the center. Months later, during a maintenance inspection, a technician found something unusual in the duct system between floors 2 and 3. Wedged inside a vent was a piece of paper, damp, worn, folded in 100 creases like someone had tried to hide it away forever. On it, written in blocky, almost childlike handwriting, "It's not a box. It's a mirror, but it shows what you forgot to bury." No one knew how the paper got there, or what it truly meant. But after that, people began to notice something disturbing. Every time Lucas entered the building, he touched the object with his fingers, gently, reverently, like one touches the photo of a loved one long gone. And every time he left, his grip tightened, as if it had gotten heavier. And yet, his arm never trembled, because what he carried wasn't measured in weight. It was measured in memory, or maybe regret, or maybe, if the old woman was right, in something far more intimate, the echoes of other people's silence. To this day, no one knows where the object came from, or what's inside, but everyone agrees on one thing. The day he drops it will be the day something else picks it up, and that's the day the deliveries will stop. Not because they're finished, but because the final one has been made. It was a big dog, a German shepherd named Nero, trained, disciplined, loyal. The kind of animal that didn't bark without reason, that watched the world not with fear, but with evaluation. Nero belonged to a retired military man on the 5th floor, a gruff, silent man named Sir Armando, who walked Nero every day at exactly 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m., rain or shine. Nero didn't bark at children. He didn't bark at delivery men. He didn't bark at sirens or passing cars, but he barked at Lucas, every single time. Not the sharp territorial bark of a dog protecting his space. This was different. It was frantic, desperate, a rising guttural panic that started as a low growl and exploded the moment Lucas appeared. Even from across the courtyard, Nero would stiffen, hackles raised, teeth bared. His leash pulled so tight it left red welts on Armando's hands. At first, people laughed. Maybe he doesn't like quiet guys, they joked. But then came the incident in the lobby. It was late. Nearly midnight. Nero had slipped his leash during a late walk and ran straight into the building's entrance, barking madly. Armando shouted, stumbling after him. And there, standing by the elevator, was Lucas, completely still, delivery bag in one hand, the black-wrapped object in the other. Nero didn't charge. He stopped dead, 3 feet from Lucas. His barking cut off like a switch had been flipped, but he didn't calm down. He whimpered, not out of pain, out of confusion, out of recognition. His body lowered slowly to the ground, tail curled between his legs, ears down. His eyes, those sharp, alert eyes, widened in terror. Not the fear of being attacked, but the kind of fear that lives in instinct, ancient fear. The kind animals have when they sense earthquakes before they come, or when they smell rot beneath the floorboards. Lucas looked down at him. 1 second, 2. No sound, no movement. Then Nero howled. Not barked. Howled. A long, soul-shaking, heart-wrenching sound that echoed off the marble floors like a siren from another world. He backed into the corner of the lobby, trembling violently, claws scraping tile as he tried to climb the wall itself to get away. Armando reached him, dropped to his knees, cradled the dog's head in both arms. Lucas turned to the elevator. Doors closed behind him. No one spoke for a long time. That night, Nero refused to sleep inside the apartment. He stood in front of the door all night, staring into the hallway, growling low, as if he knew something was still moving out there, as if the scent hadn't faded. Within a week, the dog changed. He stopped eating, stopped playing. He didn't bark at anyone anymore, not even Lucas. He only stared at corners, at walls, at places where nothing was. A vet came, ran tests, found nothing. Armando swore the dog wasn't sick. He was remembering. Whatever he saw in that moment and whatever passed between beast and man and I stuck, burned itself into his instincts, because dogs don't lie, and dogs don't fear without cause. A month later, Nero vanished. One night he scratched at the door, like he needed to go out, and he never came back. But in the days that followed, something began happening. Other dogs in the neighborhood started reacting too, growling at elevators, refusing to enter certain alleyways, pulling their owners across the street when Lucas passed. And every single time, Lucas never looked at them. He just walked, quiet, steady, and the object in his hand pulsed like it was breathing, because animals don't question what they know. They feel it. And every instinct they had screamed the same truth. He was not carrying something dead. He was carrying something alive, but not from this world. It wasn't immediate. It crept in after the door closed, after Lucas had vanished down the stairwell or into the elevator, after the sound of his footsteps had faded and the building tried to return to its normal rhythm. The smell. At first, people didn't know how to describe it. It wasn't food, nothing appetizing, not grease or spice or even the artificial sweetness of fast food packaging. It wasn't body odor either, and it wasn't perfume. It was wrong. It was metallic. Not like coins, but like blood drying on cold iron. It was damp, not like rain, but like something buried and unearthed. And it lingered, in hallways, behind closed doors, in rooms where deliveries had been made, in elevators where Lucas had stood for too long. Some claimed it clung to their clothes. Others swore they could still smell it on their skin after washing. A woman on the second floor said her hair held it for 3 days, no matter how many times she rinsed. But the worst part? It moved. You didn't just walk through it and leave it behind. It followed. Subtle at first. A suggestion in the air, a tingling in the nose. Then stronger, heavier, until it filled your lungs like fog. Until breathing became a decision, not a reflex. Until your eyes began to water, not from irritation, but from something else. Memory, because that was the other thing people began to notice. The smell wasn't just a sensation. It triggered things. Images. Flashes. A man in 6C had a vision of his mother's funeral. A moment he hadn't thought about in 20 years. A woman on the 4th floor said she remembered the hospital room where she lost her child. A room she'd blocked from her mind so violently that she didn't even know the number until that night. A teenage boy collapsed in the stairwell, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering a name no one recognized. They all said the same thing afterward. It was the smell. I remembered something I never wanted to feel again. One resident tried to fight it. She lit incense, sprayed perfume, washed her floorboards with bleach, but the scent always returned. Not strong, not overwhelming, just present, like a ghost that refused to leave until it was acknowledged. She left the building 2 weeks later without explanation. Her apartment remained empty, sealed, the windows never opened again. One night, Rodrigo, the concierge, stayed late, cleaning the lobby after a double shift. Lucas had passed through just an hour earlier, delivering a small package to apartment 7C. As Rodrigo scrubbed the marble floors, he noticed something strange. The smell wasn't coming from the bag. It was coming from the footprints. Lucas hadn't left mud or water behind. The soles of his shoes were clean, but wherever he had stepped, the air was thicker, denser. The smell clung to the floor like smoke hangs after a fire no one saw. Rodrigo followed the trail with a flashlight. It stopped halfway to the elevator. Just ended. No sign of him going forward. No sign of him turning back. Only the scent hovering there, like a warning burned into air. He turned off the lights and left early that night. The smell didn't follow him home, but it was waiting the next day, in his locker, inside his own coat, and something folded in his pocket that he swore hadn't been there before. A slip of paper, wrinkled and damp, with a single sentence written in looping foreign script. You carry more than you think. His name was Tiago, 6 years old, curious, quiet, and drawn to the things that adults dismissed too quickly. Shadows under furniture, the way light hit water, the sound of someone breathing in the next room when no one was there. His mother, Camilla, said he was imaginative, sensitive, the kind of child who didn't speak much, but when he did, it felt like he was repeating something he'd already lived. They lived in apartment 3A, and one morning, Tiago began to draw. At first it seemed normal, houses, trees, smiling stick figures. But after a week, every drawing changed. The colors darkened, the skies turned red, the windows of the houses were black, and in the center of every picture, there was a man, tall, still, and always holding a square object. He had no face. When Camilla asked who it was, Tiago simply said, "The one who doesn't knock." She thought it was a phase, maybe something he saw in a cartoon, maybe one of those creepy YouTube videos that slipped through the filters. But he insisted. "He came last night. He stood at the door. He knew my name." Camilla panicked, checked the hallway camera. No visitors, no movement, nothing, just silence. But the next day, Tiago drew the man again. This time the hallway was detailed, eerily accurate. He even included the light bulb that flickered every 3rd second, something Camilla never noticed but confirmed later was, in fact, true. The man stood in front of their door, as before, still faceless, still silent. But now the drawing included something new. Camilla, sleeping on the couch, while the man stood outside. She didn't remember falling asleep that night. She didn't remember hearing a knock. But for the first time in years, she began double-locking the door and leaving the hallway light on. The school called 2 days later. Tiago had been caught drawing during class. Again the man, again the object in his hand. But this time the figure was surrounded by smaller ones, like echoes, all reaching toward him. Their arms were long, too long. Their hands had no fingers, just points. Like they weren't trying to touch him. They were trying to follow. When asked who the other figures were, Tiago replied, "The people he's already delivered." That night, Camilla found her son sitting in the dark, staring at the front door. "Why are you awake?" Tiago didn't answer. He just pointed. "There," he whispered. "He's here again. But he's waiting for you this time." She rushed to the door. Nothing. Empty hallway. Silent. But when she returned to Tiago, he had already gone back to sleep. The next morning, there was a new drawing taped to her bedroom mirror. She hadn't put it there. It showed her, standing in the hallway, alone. The man right behind her. The black object in his hand open for the first time. A wide, deep mouth instead of a lid. And above it, the words scribbled in blocky, childlike letters. "He only takes what's been forgotten." Camilla removed the drawing, burned it, deleted the camera recordings, even moved apartments. But 2 weeks later, Tiago began drawing again. And this time, the man wasn't at the door. He was inside, behind the couch, in the hallway mirror, in the corner of the bedroom, always in shadow, always faceless. And Tiago began speaking less and less, until one day he simply said, "Mom, don't answer next time." It was just past midnight when the ping came through. Rodrigo, the night concierge, had long since stopped trusting the delivery terminal. After everything he'd seen, the glitches, the duplicates, the vanishing orders, he had started keeping a written log in a notebook hidden under the counter. That night, he saw the screen light up and sighed, reaching for his pen. But when he read the address, his hand froze. Destination, San Miguel Municipal Cemetery. Delivery window, 0015 0030. Client, private. At first he thought it was a prank, a system error. But the order was marked priority and the sender ID had no return address, just a black square. No name, no number, nothing. At 12:13 Lucas walked in. No sound preceded him, no footsteps, no door creak, just presence. Rodrigo tried to speak, but his voice didn't come out. Lucas didn't look at him, didn't glance at the screen. He already knew. The package was different this time, wrapped in cloth, tied with a string, no labels, no branding. Not a bag, not a box, but something in between, soft in places, rigid in others, heavy. Without a word, Lucas turned and exited the building. Rodrigo watched from the window as he disappeared into the night, walking toward the edge of the city, toward the place where the streetlights ended and the iron gates of São Miguel began. The cemetery was old, forgotten by most. No new burials, no working lamps, only wind and weeds and rusted hinges. But that night the gates were open, just slightly, just enough. The next morning, a groundskeeper named Osmar found something unusual. A fresh flower, a black rose, placed gently on top of a gravestone no one had visited in over 30 years. The name was faded, almost unreadable, but something had been carved recently into the stone, just below the date of death. Returned, not for the first time. Osmar didn't understand, until he checked the cemetery logbook. That grave had already been opened once, illegally, in 2004. The coffin had been found shattered from the inside, but that wasn't the worst part. It was empty. The authorities had blamed grave robbers, vandals, some bizarre cult ritual, but no one ever claimed responsibility, and the file had been quietly closed. Until now. Osmar, disturbed, went to check the surveillance footage, but the camera closest to that section of the cemetery had glitched at exactly 12:21 a.m., the same minute Rodrigo had written in his notebook. The screen went black, and when it returned it showed only fog, thick, heavy, like breath caught in time. Later that day, someone slipped a newspaper article under the cemetery's main office door. No signature, no date, just a clipping. It described the death of a child in 1989. The mother's name matched the surname on the gravestone. The article claimed the death was sudden, unexplained. No autopsy, no wake, only a burial. But the headline had been circled in red ink. Stillborn, or taken too soon. That night, Rodrigo tried to log back into the delivery terminal, but his account had been locked. The screen now showed only one message. You do not deliver to the dead, unless what you carry belongs to them. After that, Rodrigo stopped working nights. And the São Miguel Cemetery? It's closed now. Not by law, not by vandalism. People just stopped going. Even the flowers stopped growing. But once a month at 12:21 a.m., the security light near the gate flickers on. Just once, then off again. And the air smells faintly of iron and earth, like something has been returned, but not buried, just resting. They didn't believe the stories. 3 friends, college students, adrenaline junkies, and self-proclaimed skeptics, decided they would uncover the truth. For them, Lucas was just a myth born from bored tenants and paranoia. A man with a quiet job turned into a neighborhood ghost story. But deep down, even they admitted something didn't feel right. That's why they brought 3 phones, 2 cameras, and a drone. They wanted proof, not of ghosts, but of lies. They waited near the building just after midnight. Lucas had been seen making deliveries around that time. At 12:08 a.m., right on cue, he appeared. He didn't look at them, didn't change pace, just walked. Same posture, same silence, the same black-wrapped object cradled in his arm. His eyes were unfocused, or maybe too focused, on something only he could see. The trio followed at a distance. He walked farther than expected, past the main avenue into the older neighborhoods, through alleys that seemed unfamiliar even to the locals. The GPS showed they were moving, but the map refused to load. The air felt thicker, colder. One of them, Leo, checked his watch. It had stopped at 12:17. They exchanged uneasy glances but kept going. Lucas finally stopped in front of a building that no longer had windows, just empty sockets of brick. The door hung crooked. Inside, only darkness. No footsteps, no echoes, just silence that pressed. Lucas stepped through the doorway, and the drone's camera, flying high above, lost signal. At first, they laughed nervously. Guess the building's made of lead. But something was wrong. Lucas hadn't come back out. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. They argued. Then they entered. It was colder than outside, the kind of cold that didn't come from lack of heat, but from the absence of life. The flashlight beams danced across broken tiles and peeling paint. Then they saw it. A hallway. Endless. And at the very end, Lucas. Standing. Back turned. Still. They called his name, just to see if he'd react. He didn't, so they moved closer. Step by step, the air grew heavier. Phones began to overheat. One of the cameras powered off on its own. The other screen flickered, showing strange static shapes, like faces pressed against glass, screaming with no sound. When they were just 10 steps away from him, Lucas finally moved, not by turning, but by appearing closer, as if the space between them didn't exist anymore, as if they hadn't walked, they'd been brought. He raised his arm, held out the black object, and slowly unwrapped it. What they saw was never revealed, because only one of them came back. He stumbled out of the building at 3:46 a.m., eyes bloodshot, hair soaked in sweat, barefoot, with the smell of burnt paper clinging to his clothes. He was mumbling something over and over. It wasn't what he carried, it was who. The other two? Never found. Their phones were recovered days later. One was melted. The other contained a single, 7-second video that no one could explain. It showed a room full of doors. Hundreds. Thousands. All slightly open. And behind each one, a shadow moving. Lucas was not in the video, but the final frame, it froze on the inside of one of the doors, carved in jagged lines as if scratched by fingernails. You followed him here, but here, no one follows you back. It didn't happen all at once. It began with whispers, rumors muttered behind elevator doors and in the glow of phone screens after midnight. One by one, the jokes stopped. The sarcastic remarks, the memes, the casual dismissals of Lucas as just another strange guy. They all began to dry up like puddles after a storm, because people were disappearing, quietly, without trace, without violence, just gone. The boy from 3C who used to mock Lucas on TikTok, his room was found empty, everything in place but him. The influencer from the 8th floor who once posted a video of Lucas walking in slow motion with creepy music. She deleted her account and left a message in her bio before vanishing. I saw what he carries. I heard what it remembers. I'm so sorry. It wasn't just the building anymore. Other neighborhoods began reporting strange glitches on delivery apps. Phantom orders. Delivery notifications sent at impossible hours. 3:03 a.m., 4:44 a.m., to addresses that no longer existed. People received packages they never ordered, wrapped in black, no labels. Inside, nothing, just air, or a smell, a memory, a feeling that something had returned, something they forgot they buried. And still, Lucas walked, unbothered, unchanged. But no one laughed now, not even the brave ones, not even the skeptics. Something about him had shifted, or maybe they had, because now people began to remember the child they lost, the guilt they drank, the lie they told themselves every morning in the mirror. Every step Lucas took stirred something in them, a pain they'd sealed, a truth they thought no longer mattered. And then came the blackout. It struck the city like a breath held too long. No lights, no traffic, no connection. The sky was too quiet, and in the stillness came a sound. Footsteps, not rushed, not aggressive, just a calm, measured walk. The sound of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Who knew every turn, every apartment number, every door that had been opened once when it should have stayed closed. And then came the knock. Only one, not at every door, only yours. No one admits to hearing it. No one confesses to opening. But the next morning, something was different. The city felt softer, emptier, like it had exhaled and forgotten what it was holding on to. Some apartments had their lights on, others didn't. Some coffee cups were left half full. Some toothbrushes were still wet, but no laughter echoed in the hallways anymore. Only silence, the kind that follows truth. Rodrigo, the former concierge, now works in a smaller building on the edge of town. Quiet place, no delivery terminals, no night shifts, no black-wrapped boxes. But every so often he checks his mailbox at 12:21 a.m., just in case. And one night, he found a letter. No name, no stamp. Just a single page with 4 words written in perfect block letters. Some silences are earned. That was the day the city stopped laughing. Not because it forgot how, but because it remembered everything. And Lucas, he still walks. Some say he's not delivering anymore. He's just waiting.